Hello everyone, this video will be about unit testing. So I think that unit testing is an unpopular topic just because maybe for some people this is boring, some developers actually don't write unit tests at all, but in my opinion what makes you a really professional and a good developer is ability to fast and write nice unit tests. So let's start with a bit of a theory here. Why write unit tests? So unit test is a code that tests our code, which for some people can be boring, but in my opinion, when I write unit tests, I usually discover a lot of bugs that I didn't thought about when I wrote the code, and I also go over the code again, maybe refactor it. And unit tests are really a nice thing when you want to refactor something. So you don't like the code, but it's covered with tests, so you're sure you can free refactor. So as it's written here, unit testing is to verify that some piece of code and mostly classes and functions, they work as expected. So they behave as it was intended. And usually unit tests are written by software developers. So you as a developer should write unit tests almost every day. And there's just a small rules, 3 rules that I wanted to mention here. The unit tests, they are called unit because they test a single unit of code, single unit of application in isolation, and they are fully independent from each other and isolated from the other parts of the system, so that all the other parts of the system that are used in the code that you are gonna test, they are mocked. So it means all the dependencies, they are substituted with fake objects, so you don't touch them, you only focused on one thing. So the test should test only one thing. And this is a very popular picture that you usually find on the internet about types of testing. So when we see the pyramid, it's called test pyramid. You can find a lot of articles about this picture, and basically it's a reality, and it means that you write a lot of unit tests because they're fast and cheap, and you write less, or the middle part is medium size of the amount of the tests in the project. So integration tests, they're usually a bit more complicated because they test not only one single unit in isolation, they usually test the integration. So you test how different pieces of the system, they work together, so how they integrate it well. And the most slower and the most expensive is end-to-end tests. They usually a few of them, so the less unit tests are end-to-end tests, and they are really expensive because they test the whole application, like the user experience, from the user experience, like really clicking the buttons, opening the links, and they're usually written in some special test framework like Selenium and so on. So in this video we will talk about Jest. Jest is a JavaScript testing framework, and it's a very nice framework and easy to use, also very popular. For example, if you go to the State of Jest survey that I usually like to show and go to the testing category here, you'll find that Jest actually was in the beginning of 2016 it was not so popular, but now it actually in the first place, and his main rival Mocha was a good thing for many ages, now going a bit down, and Jest actually winning everything. So Jest is a nice choice in my opinion. Let's go back to Jest, and what is very important here that I want to mention, that we will write tests for the Nodejs backend. So we'll write the basic unit tests, and we will not test something like React components. If you find such tutorial, let's try to find another one, because this is just the basic of Jest. I will show you how to mock, how to write basic unit tests, and so on. So I prepared here a repo which you should find in the description, because we will not write the source code, we will write only tests. So this folder we will write in the tutorial, but this is pre-made by me, some JavaScript files and services that will be considered as source code we want to test. We're gonna test this source code. And in this tutorial, we will focus on writing the unit tests. So I started here with absolutely empty folder. You can also start with me. Empty folder, let's make npm init -yes. So now we have a package JSON and we want to install Jest. So how to install Jest? Let's go to the documentation here in the Jest website, and we can find that it's enough actually to just install Jest as a dev dependency. So let's do this. Run this command and install Jest as a dev dependency. Then in package.json, we will need to write some scripts to execute Jest. It's very easy. You need to just run Jest, that's all. But let's also add two more scripts here. Two more scripts here. Second one for the watch. So this is a very useful command that I really use a lot. And then another for coverage. I'll also talk about this later, so it can show you how much code is covered with the tests, which also can be very useful to analyze your code. Yeah, and we don't have any tests now, so let's create a folder which is called tests and create here the first test. What's very important that the file name matters, so Jest will go over all your files in your project and will try to match a specific pattern. So here it should be .test.js, or it also can be a spec. So it's two different notations, but they're absolutely the same. So let's go for spec. Now this is a file that is also changed the icon in Visual Studio Code, so we can see that this is a test, and Jest will understand this by file name. Let's go back to documentation here and find this code snippet, which is a very basic test. So this is one of the notations to make a test with a keyword called test, but we'll use a bit different notation that I like much more. It is describe and eat. So let's change it to eat and see if it also works. And here, let's make 1 + 2. So this is the basic structure of a test. The test block, which is eat or test, it has this name or actually description, what test do or what test does, and this is the block, so the test itself. In this test we make only one assert. So assert and expect is the last action that creates the check for the test. So we expect 1 + 2 to be 3. Which is actually a reality. Let's start this with yarn test. I'll make it a bit bigger so we can see. We should see our test is passing. So actually one test passed because we have only one test, and we see that this file that we created now is green, which is actually very good. So we wrote our first test. Let's delete this for now and copy the source code from the GitHub repo. So what I actually advise you to do, I advise to pause the video now and go to this folder, yeah, and copy all these 3 files to this src folder to your repo. So I actually will do the same now. Okay, so I copied these 3 files from the GitHub repo. So I hope you did the same, and if you don't find this link, please go to the description of the video. It should be in the description. Copy these 3 files and place them to this src folder. So these 3 files, they are basically an example of some API call. Like for example, let's see what we have here in the book service. Book service exports these 4 functions, and we will cover this 4 functions with tests. So you'll see how the coverage grows, and every function will have some tests. So we have here 4 functions, and we also can see here that we import or reuse 2 other files, and they are here, and they are actually almost empty. They are fake, just to show that every service, every file can have a dependency. This dependency can be your code, can be another library you're using, and you don't want to start this library during your tests. I will show you how to mock it. So we have here 2 dependencies: books provider and email service. Email service is an example of some service that is doing HTTP calls, that they are calling some email provider to send an email. Of course, you don't want to call any HTTP call, make any HTTP requests and calls during your tests. It's actually a very bad practice to do this. You should not do it. You should test in isolation. So this dependency to the email service, it of course should be mocked. So it should not call, this function should never be called from your tests. Book provider, it's an example of database. So you have database, you don't want to access the database during the tests. You don't want to access database never during your tests. So this also, as a dependency to DB, it also should be never called in tests, so it will be mocked. So you see these console logs here, fetching books and calling email service. You should not see this console log in the test console. And we will mock this to see that it's not used. And this is the main file we are gonna write tests. So let's start with this first function and write some tests for this function. This function, what it actually does, it gets the books from DB and filters the books if the title of the book includes part of the search text. So actually, the search text is a part of the title, for example. And if we found some books, then we actually map them like this and return it. But if the book's length, the filtered book's length is 0, so we don't find any books, so it means a user searched for a book that we don't have, and we want to send the missing book email. For example, we want to send an email to us: this book was searched, but it's not in our database, please order the book. Something like this. So this is a business logic. So customer asked us to implement this business logic, and we want to test this business logic. We want to cover it with tests. So let's do this. Create our main test file, which will be called book service.spec or test.js, and we will write here our first test. I actually like to use this notation, which is called describe it. I will show you actually, because it's nice to read this test. You can read them as a sentence, which is a very nice thing in my opinion. So let's make a main describe block, and inside make a it block, which is let's make another describe block here, and we will say what we want to test. When one book, for example, from all our books matches the search text, we will what will happen? Sorry. Let's make a it block here. This function should return one book, in my opinion. So this is very happy for us, the first case. So here I actually created the main describe, and this main describe here, it's what function we are gonna test, and then the first test with a condition. The first describe here, it's a condition. Condition is when one book matches the search, and what should happen? It should return one book. So this is notation called behavioral notation, because we describe the behavioral. I like this notation very much, and I usually use it. In my opinion, this is actually one of the best notations, so let's go for it. So we need to first import our service that we want to test. It's a book service, we import it. Let's import it from book service and call it here. So we call the function we are going to test the search books function. And what we expect this books length to be 1. Okay. This is our first test. Let's run it with yarn test. And our test actually failed. Let's put this to the right, for example, so we can see it better. And the test failed. And we also can see 2 console logs. So our test actually called the database, and our test actually called the mail service, which is very, very bad thing. And because this is 2 dependencies of our book service that were not mocked, they're not substituted with some fake objects. And this we need to fix, of course. And of course our test failed, because why? We expected 1, but it actually got 0, and we used the real database, which is very bad thing. So let's make a mock. So how to do mock in the Next.js? There are several ways how to do the mock. The favorite way for me is using the Jest FN, because I think it actually works better than Spion. But if you want the original implementation from time to time, it's of course makes sense to use Spion. But in this tutorial I will show you only the Jest FN. So what we want to do, we want to call the books provider, all our dependencies, from books provider, and let's also declare the email service here, email service, and we both mock them. We imported them, so let's go books provider, and the function get books, which should call the database. We just replace this with a Jest FN, which is a standard way from Jest how to mock a function. And here we'll say that we mock this with this implementation. So to return this object. It will return, for example, the array, the empty array. Let's try this, and also let's mock the mail service. Send missing a mail. That if you don't want to make any implementation here, just do nothing. So it will do nothing. Just make it undefined. So now 2 dependencies mocked. Let's run tests again. To not run this every time, we can use this command that I created before, just watch. So we'll just watch all our changes. Every time you save a test, it will run the tests, which is very, very, very useful thing. Let's use it, yarn test watch. Now it will watch for our changes in the tests, and when we click save here, it will run the test. So it runs now, and it should fail because we're still not getting what we want to get. Let's actually see what's wrong here. We expected 1, but we got 0. And why? Because the book service returned empty array. Yeah, so if you change this, for example, to 0, the test will be green. But it's exactly what we don't want, because it's a lie. We want to return 1 book. How to return this 1 book? If you mock the database, how to do this? What we can do, we can actually return here an object, a test object, which has the ID, for example, and the title. Oops, this is wrong. Title, test book. And to search for this test book, what we need to do, when we call our test function here, provide, for example, the word test. Yes, and after this we should find the book. Let's see. Yes, the test is passing. So our first test is passing, and we didn't call any dependencies. All dependencies, they are mocked. The get books are mocked to the DB, and the mail provider is also mocked, and our tests are passing. So we actually covered the tests. Nice, we have one first test that is working. But let's see what's actually with the coverage. How good is the coverage? Now, yarn test coverage. Now we see a table of all our files actually in the source, because now we have only 3 files. So let's see. We have 3 files: the book service and books provider and the mail service. We actually will write tests only for book service, but let's see, it's all these stuff are red. Why? Because it's not enough. Usually the good coverage starts from 80%, and the average coverage starts from 40-50%, and the bad coverage something like less than 50%. So we covered only 25% of our branches, 36% of our function, 46% of our lines in this file, and we have a lot of uncovered lines and a lot of uncovered statements, just because we tested only one function and we tested only one pass, which goes through the mapping. So the pass that we have tested, it starts here and ignores here and returns here. So we make another test to test if their book's length is 0, please send a mail. Let's make this as a next test, for example. Then we will increase our coverage. Actually, let's try to do this. First, let's make again the yarn test watch command and write more tests here. First of all, let's restructure this test, because this is a setup, let's say, and if this setup is called for every it block, it needs to be in the something like before each. Before each is a special construction in Jest to set up to make a configuration for many blocks of it. For example, we tested we return only one book. And what we can also test, for example, let's make another test and test the behavioral of book title. So if we provide here a publish date, which is some sort of a timestamp, I will just briefly copy paste the timestamp, for example, like this, then our test should still passing, but let's test what the name of this book is. So we have only one book, we can access it like this, and let's pick the name. That's actually a title, and what title it's supposed to be. The title is supposed to be the test book plus 2009, because this is also a logic. Let's go to the mapping function. We can find here format book name, and what this function does, if the book has a publish date, please concatenate title and year of publish. So let's see if we understand this correct. We should copy this, put it here, and also add 2009, which is supposed to be a green test in my opinion, if we don't have any bugs. Okay, if we change this to 2001, the test should fail, because this is not the behavioral. And it's exactly like this. It shows you that expected 2009, but go to, expect 2001, but go to 2009. So let's see if by this our coverage actually increased. Run the test coverage again. And see, now we have 46%. And it means our coverage a bit increased, but of course not much. We will make it even more. Okay, so 36, yeah. See what we can do. We can add the more test here. Or let's test another scenario when the 0 books matching the search criteria. So let's make this another describe here, and when 0 books match search text. Then we'll copy this before each because we'll need to configure it like this. And for example, let's just return here nothing, like it has nothing inside, or better not have nothing, because then it will be a bad test. Let's have this test book, but let's copy this for each and search for another. For example, we will have 0 books with the title another because we set up here test book, and it should return 0 books. This will be another test. So make yarn test watch again. But in this case, we should send an email. And how to test this if we mock this? So this is not used. How to test this? I'll show you how to test this. Let's first understand what's wrong. Okay, so I realized what was wrong. This is because Visual Studio Code actually is so stupid to add these auto imports here that are absolutely nothing related to Jest. I'm very sorry. So if you restart now the yarn test watch, you'll see that now we have more test pathing, which is very nice. We tested this scenario, but how to test that if we have the 0 books, we send the email, because we actually mocked this email service. So how to test that we actually send the email? So here we put the Jest. So this is substituted with a Jest mock, and this Jest mock has a special check that allows you to check if the function was called. So it means should call send email function. How to test this? Let's do exactly the same, but put here, instead of inspect email service, send missing email, and then instead of to be called, to have been called. By this, now we're not interested in the result. We're sure that we not send the email, so this function was not called. Yeah, oh sorry, so it was called actually, but what we need to do, we need to copy this block, go back to the case when we have 1 book. We should know that this is not called, should not call send email, and here just add the not dot. So by adding the not in front of the assert, we can negate it, so it's not called. Let's see. Called with the arguments. This means it was called. Let's see. Should not call the email failed, because we actually copied this together with the another text, but it should be test. SCH test should be passing. Yeah. So actually all the 5 tests they passed. So now we learned how to make an assert here, how to specify multiple checks for the 1 test. So actually we have 3 tests here, but we have actually 3 asserts, but we test the same condition. So that's why it's nice to use before each. And before each is very important, because if you mock function like this, you mock the whole service globally. Why this is important? Because I just want to show you one very basic example. For example, I take this out and put it somewhere here, for example, and you should see the tests have failed. And let's also do this the same for this block. And why it's like that? This is because how Jest processes this describe blocks. Now the tests have failed, and I explain why. Because the last mock actually was used, I think. The last mock was used, not every mock for every describe block, because this describe block scope actually doesn't work like you expect it to work. So it's nice thing to set your dependencies in the before each, so you are super sure they're executed before every test. Every test is independent. One of the rules I showed you before, test should be independent. Every test can be called only like a separate test. So you can also call the test separately by doing something like describe that only, or we can even run that only one test if you want. So it will show you that this 3 tests skipped and only this block with 0, which we put only, was executed. You can also make it only, I think, and then only one test will be called. So that's how you call only one test, and it shows you that this is very isolated and very from all dependencies and very independent. So you can call every test independent. That's why it's nice to mock with just a fan all your dependencies in the before each. So before each test it will mock it again. So they will not interfere with each other. By this I want to wrap it. We will continue building our unit test in the next video. We will write more tests for this file. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you very soon.